very excited to introduce the first speaker. Actually, Steve Gates is the Global Head of Design at Citi. And for those of you that have been at Fuse before, you will know that you've made an amazing choice for this morning. And this is his 4th year of speaking with us at Fuse. He is a second-generation creative director with more than 20 years of experience transforming agency and client-side teams to create award-winning global advertising campaigns. He's built multiple global Fortune 500 brands and also created industry-changing digital experience, many of which he's won awards for and has become famous for. So with that, I'm going to get off the podium, and if you could please join me in welcoming Steve Gates from Citi.
And the famous make sure you don't trip up the stairs part of this. How's everybody doing?
Okay.
Good. As you can find out, they usually put me up first because I don't need a microphone. I couldn't whisper in a hurricane. So look, I think hopefully this talk will dovetail nicely into what Vince and what Clark talked about this morning. I think I've known and seen those guys talk and have had the chance to work with some of them over a long period of time. I think Clark and his team at IDEO was one of the first groups that we partnered with whenever I got to Citi. So, it always helps me to turn that on. So, my name is Steve Gates. I am the Global Head of Design at Citi, and I know what you're thinking. Whenever you want to hear about design, you want to hear about innovation, you want to hear from a guy that works at a bank. It's a natural reaction. I've gotten used to it, and I'll sign autographs later. So at this point in my career, I've spent equal time working client-side and agency-side. Before Citi, if you saw on the chart this morning that Clark had, whenever Fast Company profiled like the top 10 design teams that were client-side, Starwood was one of them. I was one of the people that helped lead the Starwood Global Brand Design team for 9.5 years, until they decided to sell to Marriott, and I decided it was time to go someplace else. And so naturally, I landed at a bank. So, why did I land at a bank? Why do you care about any of this? And so the thing that I'll say that was always interesting is, so Clark gave a great talk this morning, but he had one particular slide where he talked about how Dolby spent 1.5 years and like $1 million or something creating their whole brand vocabulary, their design system. And I always kind of feel there's a little bit, and I'll date myself horribly, the rest of you can Google what this means, like there's that show Greatest American Hero where the guy like became a superhero but the manual was missing. This is hopefully that session of the missing manual of how do you actually build a brand system or a design system in this day and age that's actually going to be kind of relevant. So let's talk about, just kind of quickly, what are we going to talk about in the next 35 minutes. So what we're going to talk about is, first off, just why do you need this? Why is it something that's important? And I think some of this goes slightly beyond the obvious. We're going to talk about just what the hell is atomic design? What does this mean outside of something that kind of makes it sound impressive in a meeting? We're going to talk about the 4 parts that actually make up that system. We're going to talk about how do you actually build it, and then more importantly, how do you actually deploy it? Because these are all, again, some of the nuances that I think a lot of people say, go out and do this sort of thing, but there's not an instruction manual for how the heck you do it. So let's start with why. It's always a good place to start with any creative problem. Why do you need this? So I think that there's a lot of challenges, especially as you look at digital. As people are increasingly focused on digital, why do you need this? And I think part of what it is because the concept of pixel-perfect design, especially in digital, died a long time ago. What we're actually designing for are these dynamic, really data-driven systems. This is responsive design. App design is this way. Email is this way now. Everything changes forms. It changes shapes. It does all these sort of things. So that the concept of design where you would kind of go and do flat comps really doesn't hold up the way that it used to. That there's all kinds of form factors that demand brand and experiential consistency. We're all one keynote away from Google or Apple to having to go chase a new device, a new screen size, a new form factor, something, so that that ecosystem is constantly changing. How do you actually create experiences and create things that hold up across all these different sizes? Increasingly, you will also see a lot of companies want to use agile methodology. They actually want to be able to go in and be able to say, okay, look, we need to go faster. We need to do things more quickly. But the problem is that this is a software development methodology, which usually crushes creative if you don't actually know how to do this correctly. I could do an entire whole other session on how do you actually get creative to work with Agile. But the problem is it puts increased pressure on the creative teams to be able to produce inside of these sprints. And the other thing you start to see, and we've started to talk about this, you've heard the other speakers say, is that so often we're in an internal and external mixed environment. More and more companies are bringing creative teams in-house. This is where I've spent over the last decade of my career is leading internal teams. But then you also see that there's still the need for agencies, and how are the two of those getting along, and how do you keep them all on the same page? And this is basically what we're dealing with, is one message, one system that has to keep changing shape, keep changing form, communicate differently. So how do we actually do this? And now the good part is that atomic design will actually let you do all of this faster and cheaper. This is always the holy grail of what everybody wants, faster and cheaper. But, like we said before, it's going to take some time and some knowledge to be able to develop this to the point where you can actually use it and deploy it and make it useful. And that this is something that, like I said, I always want to caveat this up front, just so that everybody's aware of what that is. And so for the first 7 months, whenever I got to City, I developed what was called the City Digital Design Language. We're a corporation, so everything has to become an acronym or it doesn't actually really exist. It's like, right, so I saw on Instagram, it didn't really happen, right? But this is the thing. So we, of course, have to call it the DDL. So the DDL is really kind of the new unifying design language that we have built to look across all the different experiences that we have, from your Apple Watch, through websites, through apps, through ATM screens, through billboards, through everything that we build is now done through this one design system. But I think that the other thing that atomic design does is that it lets you do something much bigger. And that creatives don't always love to hear this, but I think that we're at a time and a place where it's a message that we need to talk about. Because what it does is it lets you focus on creativity. Because the one thing that I would say that I would probably amp up a little bit more from the two keynotes that we talked about this morning is that what companies want, what big businesses want, more than design, is they want creativity. My job, whenever I came into City, was to bring creativity into this company. As a 204-year-old institution, I'm the first head of design in 204 years. More than a few bad habits we had to break. But the thing is that what they want is that it's not wanting for people who have great ideas. What they want is creativity. They want these ideas. And the way that I look at that is design is a byproduct of that process. Because it's the problem solving, it's the creativity that we really have to focus on. That's where we deliver value. And that the actual physical design of it is then an expression of that thinking. But the problem is, and the mistake that I see time and time again, is that all you do is focus on the design part of that equation. This is why internal groups, this is why agencies and so many other ones have become commodities. Because if all I'm doing is delivering design, I can find other people who can do it faster, better, and cheaper. But if my focus is on creativity, and if that is the driving force of my group, all of a sudden I am a critical asset that gets funding, that gets attention, that gets brought to the meetings. This is why I really truly believe this, that as creatives, we have an opportunity right now to affect business in a way that we have not seen since the Industrial Revolution. And the problem is, in most cases, we're fucking blowing it because of the fact that we're focusing on the wrong thing. So I think that what these systems do is that they let you get a lot of the design pieces under control so that you can focus on the quality of your idea. You can focus on the way things actually need to function and the impact they're going to have, as opposed to reimagining what a button looks for every single project. So, rant over. So just what is atomic design? And so the thing that you look at is that people have built design systems for a really long time. This is what visual languages are. Brands have done this for forever. You started to see this in visual, in digital design, but in a lot of cases, there are just some core problems that we have to overcome. In a lot of cases, there's very little communication from the brand team. This is something where they put it together, they launch it out in the world, and it just goes out, and it's just like good luck, and then maybe we'll revisit it every couple of years. There's no governance over these systems. If they need to change, if there's new things that come into it, how do you actually get that done? How do we make this into an actual living system? There are too many versions of the design system. I came into City and I swear found 14 different design languages. 14! How is that possible? Well, the way it's possible is because every little business group decided that they needed their own little look. They needed their own version. They needed their own button color. I had to have 40 arguments about button color. Button color! Because that was the thing that was unique and they needed to hold on to, was the color of a button. Okay. We have other problems. That in a lot of cases, these design systems aren't sustainable and they're not expandable. So that they have this kind of end of life built into them, which makes it very hard to get people to invest in them. There's not enough creativity, there's not enough creative flexibility in these design systems. Because this is the part where I said a lot of designers can struggle with these because they feel like, well, there are these set pieces that I have to use and I can't solve the problems the way that I need to. And that creates a huge problem, and so sometimes the design teams will reject them. And the other thing that you'll see is that for whatever reason, people have decided that the PDF is the way to house these problems. Here again, I showed up to find 400 to 600 page PDFs outlining design systems, which obviously kept somebody busy for a really long time and got them paid really well for doing it. And it was out of date, I guarantee you, before it launched. So, atomic design is a term that actually came not from me. It was from a guy named Brad Frost, who was the one who originally had kind of come up with this. Because I think, as designers, one of the things that we need to do is we need to communicate what it is that we're doing in a way that people can connect with. And so atomic design comes from chemistry. Not always the most relatable thing, but in this case I think it makes a lot of sense. And that really what it says is that if you think about chemistry, everything is made up of atoms. And that those atomic bonds are the things that then form molecules, and that those then combine to form more complex organisms. This is essentially the basis and the thinking behind what atomic design systems are. Because ultimately what you want is that that combination of increasingly complex things form all the matter in the universe. This is what we would hope for design. And like I said before, this isn't that terribly different than building a brand system. It's just sometimes the level of complexity in the way that you need to do it and the way that it's rolled out may be a little bit different. I'll tell you some of the ins and outs of that. So we'll walk through what are just the basic 4 parts. And it's literally what I just went over. They're atoms, molecules, organisms, and ultimately for digital or things like that, pages. And so, what the hell does all of this mean? So atoms really are the basic building blocks of matter, right? These are the color palettes, the fonts, the individual elements, the most base part of any design system. And so what this is like in our case, these are the standard colors that we use. This is the typography. This is the way we use interstate. This is the way a button is. This is the smallest divisible system that we can actually come up with. And that the reason why you start at this level is because, here again, I need to maintain flexibility. I need to maintain creativity. So that if somebody has the skills, they can go ahead and take all the individual parts and start designing with that. Not everybody should and get that freedom. Everybody just thought of somebody that they... So we start to make that increasingly complex because there are some people who shouldn't have that level of freedom. And so what molecules do is that they group atoms together to basically make the smallest fundamental unit of a design system. These would be things like for digital, form labels, inputs, buttons and things like that, because they're not terribly useful by themselves, but when I combine them together, they can actually start doing something. Here again, let me show you an example. So that if I took the way that we use icons, and I took a piece of body copy, if I put those together, that then starts to become a molecule, because that's now a standard grouping that I can use across my entire design system. If I say that every time we're actually going to have a search field, that I'm going to use my H2 headline, and we're going to use a form field with that, that's now a standard grouping that I can use to be able to then start to create that over and over again. Because the other thing that you find out is that there are certain things where we don't need to reinvent the wheel every time. I don't need to reinvent an address entry field. I don't need to reinvent the lockup between an icon and a piece of copy. This is something we can standardize because, again, the biggest thing that we're doing here is that we're trying to keep a unified experience. Often whenever I have multiple design teams work on multiple different things, but it needs to line up and actually look like one thing. So from there we get a little bit more complicated and then we start moving into organisms. And these are now groups of molecules that start to really form something that's a bit more distinct in an interface. So in this case, if we took that icon and a little piece of copy, I combined it with a bigger piece of copy and a headline, that's now a header block that I can use consistently through the site. If I want to do an ATM locator, now I can use that headline, that search field, 3 radio buttons and a search box. That now becomes my standard ATM finder. The problem that I've seen is that most design systems only do this. They only do the organism piece, which is, in many cases, is the easiest. It's the most idiot-proof. Because then this is the one where you just have to pick up these pieces and put them in. The challenge is that if you do that, very quickly your system is going to become an excuse. An excuse because of the fact that I can't do what it is that I want to do as a client. I can't design the way I want to as a designer because I'm so wired into this. This is why the scalability and the flexibility across these different systems is so important. Because trust me, I've seen organization after organization that when you just do it at this level, everybody has an excuse why they're different and special and they're their own unicorn and like the whole 9 yards for this. But that's what I said, is it gives you this kind of tiered level of complexity that will allow you to have as much freedom as you want, but at the same point, if there are certain vendors, if there are certain clients who you know don't have that amount of flexibility that then you can use kind of the upper part or the organism part of the system so that that's something they can work with. And that's really the balance, is how do I find consistency and creative freedom? Those are the two things that are very, very hard to keep tied together. And ultimately what these things do is then they manifest into the actual pages. This is the expression of it, right? And this is the highest level of fidelity because they're the most tangible. These are the things that clients see. These are the things that everybody else sees. So, and I think that, obviously this is where most of the time that people see this system is where it's going to be, because that goes through those reviews. So I'll give you an example. This is the newly launched and redesigned city.com homepage. This was done by my team in New York, who used our DDL system to go through and do that. Simultaneously, I had my design team in Singapore going through and doing a redesign for the site in Poland. And so here again, two totally different sets of clients, two totally different parts of the world. And what you find is, while there are subtle differences, we have experiential consistency between the two so that it actually holds together. And this is the point of this, is because as we've talked about so much of this, we have to get towards human-centered design, consumer-centered design, which means that this consistency and experience is what matters. That the people who want their own little colored buttons, who want all that their own stuff, is great for their big five at the end of the year because they created a button color, and God help whoever the boss is that thinks that's an accomplishment. But at the end of the day, it really confuses the consumer because all of a sudden your brand looks like a pack of Skittles. So, the other thing that I will say is that I don't believe in templates as part of this system. There's some people, when they teach atomic design, will talk about templates. The reason why I say that I do not believe in templates is because I feel like, as we look at the molecules and the organisms that are part of this system, those give you repeatable pieces. But here again, the problem is going to be that you will never be able to make enough templates to make everyone happy. Now, you're going to turn your design team into a template factory. And if you want all your really good designers to leave really quickly, this is a fantastic way to do it. Because that's the thing, is it's either going to become an excuse or a massive time suck. And that neither one of those are outcomes that you want. So that's why, for me, I've never bought into templates. Whenever we launch this at City, there are no templates for this. There are examples of pages that you can use. But yeah, we do this crazy thing of actually expecting the groups to be creative and think and design on their own. So, how do you actually build one of these? Because that's the part, right? These are the slides everybody always shows. It's like, oh, here are the pretty pictures. Here are all the parts we did. That's great. Building it is another animal altogether. Deploying it is another animal altogether. So I think what I wanted to try to do is to share what are all the secrets that I've learned doing all this to try to make it easier for everybody else. The first thing that I would tell you is, before you even start to design a thing, set your standards to be clear about what you want your system to accomplish before you build it. Get buy-in from the business, get buy-in from your clients so that everyone is on the same page for what this actually needs to do. I'll give you the example. Our standards were, it had to be mobile first, because we see an increased shift in that, and mobile could have been responsive web, it could have been apps, but we needed to think mobile first. We needed to obviously have a consistent look and feel. These Skittles look of button colors and everything else had to go away. It needed to be responsive, both for responsive web design, responsive app design, responsive email design, everything is responsive, so it needs to actually be able to transform and change shape. It actually has to be global, which is a novel concept as a global brand, is the fact that, believe it or not, there are other parts of the world outside of North America that do these crazy things with telephone numbers, with calendars, with currency, with language, with all sorts of other things that you have to take into account and make it a part of your system. That's the other great way, if you want to get it discarded, is launch something that's only going to work in North America. It needs to be fully ADA compliant. The Americans with Disability Act is not anything that is optional. There's nothing that goes out the door from our shop anymore that is not fully ADA compliant. There's no reason to be able to do that. And you can actually still launch beautiful and elegant design that is fully ADA compliant. It may take a little more work, it may take some knowledge on your part, but it can certainly be done. And then, like I said before, it has to be form factor agnostic. Small as a watch, big as a billboard. The other thing I will tell you guys is, I see everybody taking pictures and furiously scribbling notes. I will also send this deck out afterwards so that you can have this as like a reference point, because the other thing that I've learned is it's much better if you guys can absorb this and I'm not presenting at the top of everybody's head. So, from that, start with the basics. And this is one of these things, because these systems can get really, really complicated really, really fast. And especially the bigger the brand is, the more touch points you have, the more complicated this becomes. So start with things like the basics, like grid, layout. How do you handle modals? What are the different molecules? What's your color and typography? How are you structuring content? What are the actual design principles that you're going to hold everyone to so that these are the things whenever we design an experience, this is what we want them to be. Inputs, buttons, sliders, progress indicators, badges, and even going so far as then even creating code snippets. I'll show you the way we house all of our design language, but there actually is bootstrap code that goes with all of this so anybody can pick it up, fully responsive, fully ADA compliant. Makes it much simpler. And then the thing that I'll tell you is that as you start to build your system, try to break it constantly. Test it and test it and test it. There are different things, because I think that you need to invest in research to test your system before you start building with it. I know that this isn't always the sexy part, because you have this new shiny toy, you want to roll it out. But trust me, put it in front of consumers, see how it performs, run it through ADA testing, and do a bunch of other things. Validate your standards. You said these are the 6 things that we're going to do. Did you actually do all of them? Is it mobile first? Is it ADA compliant? Is it actually global? Make test pages to try to break the system. Actually go out and say, okay, great, we've got this kit of parts, can I actually make a car out of it? Do I get a Yugo or do I get a concept car? Very quickly you can find mistakes in your system. And then the other thing that you do is give the system to other teams and let them work with it and see what happens. Because that's the other part, is how do you see the forest for the trees? If your whole team's been the one that's been developing it, of course they're going to work around all the problems. Of course they're going to glaze over the things that aren't perfect. When you give it to somebody else, all that stuff comes to light. But the time to do this is to bulletproof it before you launch it, because the problem is, and this is the time-old adage, you don't get a second chance to make a first impression. And then everybody will try to discount this, because again, you're threatening in a lot of cases what they feel is their creative freedom, because you're bringing the system and putting that in place. So now it comes time where you actually want to deploy this. You want to roll this out to the world. And so there's a lot of different tips and tricks that we've developed that I can make this much easier. The first is sticker sheets, which is a term that I'll openly say we took from Google. If you ever work with their material design system, they have what they call sticker sheets, which are the way that they express their design system. And this is the thing, is that most big design companies have been using atomic design for a really long time. iOS and Android are atomic design systems. Airbnb, Uber, American Express, like all the companies that everybody always likes to deify use atomic design for the way they create everything. But the reason why you want to do this is because it gets consistency. But the thing is that there's a burden that is on me and my team to make sure that this is easy to be able to do. Because at a certain point, again, if it's hard, you have to pull all the excuses out of it. So our system is built in 2 different platforms. It's built in Sketch and built in Adobe XD. And that what these actually are huge documents where every single element is laid out. Every single color is in there as a system. Every piece of type is in there as a type style. You have examples of what are all the grid paddings as you go through and do this entire thing, so that if I need to go pick up any element, I can do that. If I want to go through and look at the inputs, the navigation menus, the modals, all of these are pre-built. So what I need to do is just go in, pick this up, drop this into my document. I don't have to recreate it. This is something, again, that where I can get to design incredibly quickly because of the fact that all this is ready and at my fingertips. And then here again, make pieces of, like the hero pieces that we had at the top, pieces of copy. As you can see, everything is designed in desktop and in responsive mobile web there as well, so you can see the way it works in both places. So here again, you can pick up both of those elements. But that's the thing, is that this makes it incredibly simple. No excuses why someone can't follow the standards. All the colors are in there. All the type styles are in there. All you have to do is just copy and paste. And please let someone come and tell me how that's something more that they can do. Real short conversation. But that's the part of it. But the other thing that I'll tell you is that there's a trap here. Because you need to also make a low-res version of this for actually doing wireframing. Because yes, it's incredibly easy. You come in, you pick up the elements, you do these different things, you can start designing with it, but then you have a problem. Because now all of a sudden I have something that looks like a finished design. So people judge it like a finished design. But what if I'm just in the wireframe stage? What if I'm just thinking about these sort of things? So what we actually have is there's a low-res version of this A lot of it is taking out a lot of the color, a lot of it's taking out and simplifying it down, because what that allows us to do is at this stage to focus on the thinking, focus on the creativity and not get caught up in the design, but then it makes it incredibly easy for us to come in and just swap out the elements to start to res it up, and as the designers come in, they can then go through, they can start to refine it, they can look at the type sizing, they can start to look at a lot of the other things that will actually bring the design to life beyond just the basic functionality. But it is a trap that if you don't do this, all of a sudden you're going to have this problem where people aren't going to look at the form and functionality, they're going to look at it as finished design. So that's obviously a huge problem. You have to think about versions for other platforms. So for instance, this is the way we do input fields for web. And one of the things, if you ever worked in ADA, is that you need to have a visible change in a form field for it to be ADA compliant. So that's why the input field at the top in its regular state says input title, but when you click on it, you get a blue outline around it, and the input title then jumps to the top. Because you have to do that to be ADA compliant. So like I said, you can still make beautiful design that is ADA compliant, but this is the way form fields look like for the web. Whenever I think about Android or I think about different form factors, this doesn't work anymore. So you actually have to go through and think about how are we then going to do this and use their form factor, to use the precedent that they've set to be able to make sure that this system actually holds up and translates into Android. Because if you want a list of really bad reviews, launch an iOS app or launch an Android app that looks like a web app. Or even worse, launch an Android app that looks like an iOS app. Having made those mistakes with multiple different companies, trust me, not the way to go. So, the other part of this is selling it. How do you communicate it? How do you communicate the value of this to your organization? How do you tell people what's going on with this? Because the biggest part of this and the biggest part of your success is going to be communicating what the hell is this system? What is it going to do? Why should people care about it? Why are we going to adopt it? And that's what I said, is that PDFs are going to be out of date before you launch them. That is not the way to do it. And so what we've done is everything is housed in a website. It is meant to be a living document. It is meant to be something that is updated regularly, because this is a common rallying point for everybody. I mean, we have design teams in 3 different countries across 6 different studios, plus I don't know how many agencies. That's a lot of people. So that this is actually the website that it's housed in. And what you can do whenever you come here is that you can actually go through and you can see what is the foundation of the way that we design at City. What are the different components? What are modules? What are the design examples? Where are downloads? If you have questions, you can get in touch with us. You can actually go in and then look at all these individual elements. So if I want to go in and look at the input fields that we talked about before, I can turn on the grid and to see all the responsive breakpoints. I can actually go in and interact with all of these different form fields so that I can see the way that they work. What are the different sizes? What's the different coloring? I can actually see the markup language and pick that up so that I can actually go and start developing with this. It makes it infinitely easier. I can start to look at the more complex modules so that I can start to look at what are different header versions, how are different ways that we use that, what are the release notes around all this sort of stuff. And then again, the entire site is responsive so that I can actually watch to see how does this whole thing actually function and work in real life. So again, it's not just that sketch document that nobody kind of really can relate to. But that's the part of this, is it creates a living repository for us to be able to house all this stuff. So that if you're a product owner, if you're a part of the business, you can go, it's educational about the system, you can see it and understand the value in it. If you're a designer or developer, you can go in and there's the nuts and bolts in there of the sticker sheets, of the markup code that you can actually use to start developing it incredibly quickly so we can get that consistency. And the other thing that I would tell you is that that's not enough. You have to do a regular proactive communication to everybody who uses the design system. I've thought long and hard about the best way to do this, and unfortunately the only thing I could come up with was to do the most corporate thing possible. We released a newsletter. Look, it's an email culture, we're working on that, but for right now, this was the way to go, right? Like, I trust me, this was not, my soul died a little when we got to this spot. But what we do is we send out a monthly newsletter that says, okay, here's the new release. Here's what DDL is, here are the highlights, here's what's coming, what are the challenges you're gonna have, what is accessibility? Because part of this is education. It's letting people know and engage with this. And a lot of the cases is that we also send this to a lot of people who are executives and other things who didn't sign up for it, because they still need to be aware of it. And so I think that there is some part of it, no matter how you do it, of doing this sort of proactive communication. Because that's the thing, is that the only other thing that I found to do is to do a roadshow. Is to go out, sit down with the product team, sit down with the tech team, sit down with all these different groups to be able to show them in real life what is the value. How do you build it? Do a presentation like this so they can see it and understand it, so that it's not this sort of thing that becomes rumor. Because that's the other part that you'll find, is that pretty soon, like for me, once it finds success, all of a sudden DDL becomes like Xerox or Kleenex or something, where like everything is DDL, like every piece of the website, the nav, all sorts of stuff that has got nothing to do with the design language suddenly gets pulled in under that umbrella. So you have to explain the system and show the results and answer questions, and to really show people that this is, and creativity is, a team sport. We're not off in the corner wearing a beret, doing a watercolor of our spirit animal, too good to talk to anybody else because we're designers. This is actually something that we're going to work on all together because we're all vested interest in making this work. As a part of that is then once you launch it, just like any other agile product, you need to have a backlog. And you have a clear process for how are you going to make changes? How do new items get into the system? How do we evolve it? How do we sustain it? You need to be able to publish that backlog so that people can see it and know whenever they submit things that it is public, that it is getting groomed, that it is prioritized, and the thing that they're asking for is in that queue, and here's where it is and why. So that there's an open discussion about what this is, and it's not just suddenly being hidden away, and it's not something that anybody knows anything about. Governance is the other part of it. You need to have people who are responsible for answering questions and leading the system. The problem is going to be that rarely is this going to be someone's full-time job. But the problem is that somebody has to be able to help. And so there's a number of ways that we've done this. We right now hold bi-monthly meetings where every design team, every agency, every tech partner, everybody is invited to come to this, to show work that they've done, to talk about their successes, to talk about the things that are really screwed up, so that we as a group can talk through how do we solve for this. So again, there's an open dialogue that takes place around this, so you can really see what's going on for this. But it doesn't give us the chance to do governance, because the other problem that you don't want is all the little workarounds. The product people who figured out that, well, if they go to design and design said no, but if I go to tech, well, tech probably will tell them yes, so that they'll actually then just build this variation of the system. Tech needs to know that I'm going to land like the hammer of God on whoever decided that that was a good idea, and then all of a sudden they're part of my team. Because again, don't want to be that guy, but we have to keep some sort of control over this. So again, making the guide rules clear for everybody through these meetings. And then finally, the fact that this needs to evolve. Because the challenge is going to be that you start by just creating visual consistency. That's what that system does. That's what we've done at City right now, is we've got visual consistency. So for the first time, all these experiences can start to line up. They can look like one brand. They can look like one experience across a multitude of different languages, a multitude of different countries, a multitude of different places. But that just gives me visual consistency. There's a ton that's missing. And so you have to keep evolving around things like interaction patterns. So actually, how does it move? How does it interact with people? Branding and co-branding situations so that we're clear about the way that the brand actually comes to life. When and where is it used? Content, tone, and voice. Because content, again, is a huge piece of inconsistency. As I've gone through company after company and looked at this stuff, if you ever worked on global brands, they do this thing called translation knowledge, which is when we translate something that relates to a brand, we capture that so that we're sure that we do it every single time and we talk about it the same way. The problem that I find with most big brands is I need to do that, but I need to do it for English. Because of the fact that they can't talk about the product the same way. It goes from first person to third person. They reference things different ways. So we need consistency in the tone of voice of the way we talk about things. And also, how does it move? How does it sound? How does it do a lot of the other kind of fun, subtle things that really brings a brand to life and gives it personality? And there's a ton of that work beyond just the visual consistency part of that. So, that's the bulk of my spiel. I'm going to leave some time for questions. If you guys are all interested in hearing me ramble on about this and a lot of other things, about 6 months ago I started a podcast called The Crazy One. For anybody who doesn't know, I actually have Here's the Crazy Ones tattooed on my right arm. I find that it sets the right tone whenever you're in a meeting and you want to make change. I think also just because I spent way too long in my career feeling like an outsider, like what I was doing was wrong, and I got so pissed off about it that I wanted, some days it's a reminder, some days it's an affirmation about the fact that like, I'm going to believe in what I believe, and again, you kind of know what it is that you're getting into. But it covers everything around leadership, creativity, design. There's an episode on atomic design that goes into a little bit more detail. I'm in the midst of doing a series right now on design thinking. I was IDEO certified design thinking trainer, having worked with Clark and his team on that for over a year to become certified in doing that. Covers a ton of stuff like that. Enough of a shameless self-promotion.